Wonderful. Well, listen, I want to welcome everyone here to the webinar. This is what we're going to cover this afternoon, roughly in the next hour. We're going to talk about how our ancestors persevered. Of course they persevered, because we wouldn't be here if they didn't. We are going to discuss a variety of misfortunes and disasters. The one thing that I have to say is don't everything on the surface, there's a lot of stuff under the surface that you have to understand, that misfortunes, disasters, these things that happen are a lot more complicated than they look on the surface. And this is a key to finding the record sets that are involved. Death, we'll talk about natural disasters. Under death, it's only natural. Talk about technology, and believe it or not, technology can kill. As there were advances made in technology, we did see an increase in lives taken in disasters related to technology. Unhealthy living, epidemics, pandemics. We'll talk about things like the Black Plague, ranging to the 1918 flu, Spanish influenza epidemic, and more. Politics and disasters, very often warfare, but also very often natural disasters become politicized, and we'll talk about that as well. And then finally we'll follow up with filthy, deadly money. I think this is in the news lately. The whole idea of economic disasters, boom and bust cycles, depressions, recessions, had a big impact on our ancestors. Now we are going to spend most of our time, though, focusing on the stories related to our ancestors. Dead men and women do tell tales. There are tales of disaster out there. You just need to know how to find them, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Disasters are a double-edged sword in a way. They do destroy record sets, but also they create record sets, and I want to point this out, and how you can find not just the record sets created, but also substitute record sets for the records that are destroyed. How to locate your ancestors among the aftermath as victims, as living victims, as in deaths, and also how you can give voice to the silent, how you can go ahead and write the stories for your ancestors, how they work their way into history, into these disasters. And finally, the syllabus, the handouts that come with the CD, have a series of links, and that is, I believe, with the purchase of the CD. But let's go on here. And where did I get the title for this from? Now, those of you may know that there is a church hymn called "It Is Well With My Soul," and it was written by Horatio Spofford. In fact, I have his name spelled wrong there. It's S-P-A-F-F-O-R-D. He's the author of the hymn. He overcame immense tragedy, misfortune, and disaster. Here's an example. His only son died in the 1870s. He lived here in Chicago. Then he was an attorney with investments, life insurance, property holdings that was wiped out during the Great Chicago Fire in 1871. Shortly thereafter, he decided to take his family on a vacation to Europe, and he sent his wife and 4 children ahead of time. And they were shipwrecked. All 4 remaining daughters were killed, and his wife survived. And even despite all that, he was able not only to write the song "It Is Well With My Soul," but he also was able to go out on a mission and set up a Christian mission in Jerusalem that worked with the Muslim community and the Jewish community as well, and kept a very positive outlook on life. We would hope that all our ancestors could keep that positive an outlook on life. I want to show some pictures here from the Spofford family album that are at the Library of Congress. You can find these at their site. If you just search for Horatio Spofford. This is Horatio Spofford. This is his wife. She was of Norwegian descent, actually born in Norway. This is a picture of the etching of the V de Hav, which was the name of the ship, the steamship that was rammed by another ship and sank. I believe there were 266 people killed on board. This is the family album of the 4 daughters up here. I think it says Annie, Maggie, Bessie, and Loretta that were killed in the shipwreck. This is the telegram. This is the well-known telegram that Mrs. Spofford sent back to her husband. Basically, it says, "Saved alone, what shall I do?" Then she goes on to say her traveling companions and gives an address in Paris where they took everyone that was rescued. And finally, this is the manuscript for the hymn, It Is Well With My Soul, that Horatio Spofford did write based on this one experience. And this was stationary from a hotel here in Chicago. So I want to give a little bit of background where it came from, the title of that. So now, our ancestors did persevere. We all know this, but we're going to talk about how did they persevere and survive in the face of disaster, what types of disasters confronted them, and you know, if they didn't persevere, they didn't give up. If they had, we wouldn't be here to tell their stories or our stories. They may not have come out of disaster with as positive an outlook as Horatio Spofford, although we like to think so. But this is part of, these things made history. Here in the United States is where I'm focusing mostly, but also it's part of our own family's history. So what types of disasters and misfortunes did they come across? So typically, in the terminology, a disaster is an unexpected event, usually the natural kind, such as a hurricane, a tornado, an earthquake, and the like. However, there are many different types of disasters that have struck our ancestors and impacted the lives of those left behind. They leave orphans, they wipe families out financially, they cause people to up and move. Look at Hurricane Katrina in 2005. And the big migration pattern that resulted because of that. This is not just ancient history. This is stuff that is still happening. So also you need to realize that it isn't all cut and dried when you try to sort out the types of disasters. Here's an example. A health-related disaster, such as a flu, could have technological and political factors involved. Famine, I know, can be very politicized. Hunger is very politicized. There are countries where the government will control food sources, and this can lead to famine. So it's not all just one factor. Also, let's look at hurricanes, blizzards. Can you imagine 100 years ago when they did not have the technology to forecast a hurricane the way that we can now, and the number of lives that were lost relative to the number of lives that you see lost today. So there are many different factors. When you think of tornado, there might be how was the local government, how was the community involved in terms of cleanup and dealing with survivors. So we've seen this in various recent disasters as well. So I just want to make it clear that it's not all as it seems on the surface. Let's talk about natural disasters. Now, natural disasters, we're talking, as I said before, hurricanes, typhoons, tornadoes, blizzards. We have avalanches. What about wildfires, massive fires, like here in Chicago, the Great Fire of 1871, earthquakes, 1906, San Francisco. I personally lived through the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake in San Francisco. I was on the 38th floor of an office building in San Francisco downtown. Didn't think I would survive. And while they all seem to be naturally related or weather related, again, there are other factors. Poor building codes. Look at what went on in Turkey recently, taking shortcuts for building buildings. Mexico has had the same problem. So very often what I do want to point out later on is you will often see changes to laws based on natural disasters, improvements in building codes, changing the way things happen. Another example is the Iroquois Theater Fire here in 1903 in Chicago. I believe 800 people died. This is, the reason is there was a panic. People tried to get out, but the doors opened in. Nowadays, this is why doors at a public venue open out. They don't open in. That was the reason for that disaster. And so I just want to point out these are the things that do change. There is some good that comes out of disasters. So again, we've covered hurricanes, all the natural stuff, avalanches, earthquakes, etc. Now, technology. One thing I want to point out on technological disasters is can you imagine if your ancestor was the first person killed in a car accident? Do you think when they invented the car, when they invented the train, they would imagine how many lives could be taken through this advance in technology? Technology brings us many, many advances and improvements, but also there's a great increase in accidents, intentional or unintentional, unintended consequences, train wrecks, airplane crashes, vehicular accidents. Also, as technology improves, with coal mining, gas and electric pollution, we can mine and drill deeper, but that can lead to more intense disasters and loss of lives. So technology does greatly impact the disasters that our ancestors went through. Unhealthy living. Epidemics and pandemics. We have the Black Plague. Cholera outbreaks. I know that cholera outbreaks really plagued my ancestors, especially in New York, in the 1830s and 1840s. This is the reason why in many cities you see a move to have cemeteries located outside the city limits in the early to mid-1800s, because basically they did not want the bodies with the cholera outbreaks buried within the city limits. Spanish flu, 1918, worldwide consequences. And also modern-day HIV and AIDS epidemic and pandemic as well has had an impact on family history. Politics and disasters. Now, there are political disasters. I know someone may laugh and say all politics are a disaster, but we're talking about things here like war, genocide, the Holocaust. Look at the record sets that are still surviving from the Holocaust. In fact, today is the anniversary of Kristallnacht, November 9th. Which was an event during the lead up to the Holocaust, and famine. Also, I'm going to go back there. I'm sorry. Now, a lot of these things were also the impetus for our families coming over to America, those of us that are in America. Famine, war, genocide, political boundaries. I know my German ancestors, this was the real push factor to get them out of Germany and to get them over here. So see, already for most of us, I would say that this is a type of disaster. These types of disasters factor in. Financial disasters. As the world progressed, much of the progression was propelled by economics and a market economy. When there's money involved, you're going to have opportunists. And you're also going to have cycles, depressions, recessions, panics. I know that my great-grandparents went through the Great Depression in the 30s. It was very difficult for them. My grandparents raised 12 kids in Jersey City, New Jersey during the Depression. I don't know how they did it, but they did. You have the boom and bust cycles also in those, boom towns, gold mining, silver mining, any speculation. You're going to get people that show up to swindle and cheat people. Now, economic disaster does not often result in direct death or physical injury, but it also can have an impact on the family. Long-lasting, I mean, people would have to pick up and move during the Dust Bowl, move to California, move other places. During the Great Depression, there was a big influx into the city out of the rural areas to look for work and look for jobs. So again, there is quite a bit of impact from these types of disasters. So, Jeff, I'm going to move on here to going on to any of the tales. I do want to check in and see if there are any questions so far about this before I move on.
Not yet, Thomas. You're doing well.
Great. Thank you. And now, dead men and women do tell tales. So, now we've had our little education lesson on the different types of disasters, their causes, their factors. Now we're going to come to talk about whether or not they were involved, whether they were made victims, how you can find out more about your ancestors involved with disasters. So before you get started first, it helps, just like in any genealogy search, to have as much information as possible about your ancestor. Okay? Now there are some issues that you do want to consider. Details do matter. Now look closely at death certificates. The cause of death might be listed, but very often there were secondary causes of death from disasters, and not all victims died instantly or within days of a disaster, talking things like black lung,